High on a windswept hill in southeastern Turkey, stones older than writing stare back with carvings no one could truly read, until now. An artificial intelligence, trained on every groove and pattern at Göbekli Tepe and its sister sites, has just decoded a hidden logic that ties animals to constellations, scenes to sky events, and rituals to cycles of catastrophe. If the machine is right, these pillars are not just art. They are a cosmic warning carved in stone. What exactly were our ancestors trying to tell us? The site that rewrote the origin story. Before Göbekli Tepe, the story of civilization seemed neat. First came farming, then permanent villages, then temples and cities. The dig that began in the mid-1990s appended that timeline in a single season. Beneath a man-made hill emerged great circular enclosures ringed with T-shaped pillars, some 20 tons in weight, each dressed with belts, hands, and belts, each flanked by animals that looked less like ornaments and more like declarations. Radiocarbon dates pushed the whole complex back to the 12th millennium before the present, thousands of years before the first fields in Mesopotamia. The implication was astonishing. Hunter-gatherers, who supposedly lacked the surplus, hierarchy, and organization to build monuments, had built one of the most ambitious ritual landscapes on Earth. Walk the site and the same elements repeat with deliberate rhythm. Twin central pillars stand in each enclosure as if personified beings preside within the circle. Around them, foxes sprint, snakes coil, boars bristle, vultures spread their wings, scorpions brace to strike. These are not neutral masks of nature. Several are emphatically male, several are shown in aggressive postures, and several recur with near-obsessive consistency across different rings. Archaeologists argued over meaning for decades. Perhaps the animals were totems for clans, perhaps they formed a bestiary for myths, perhaps they were simply power symbols chosen for their ferocity. Yet the repetitions would not loosen their grip. If the sculptors kept carving the same figures in the same relationships over centuries, then pattern was the point. Pillar 43, the famous vulture stone, concentrated the puzzle. A vulture raises something in its wing. A scorpion anchors the base. Other creatures crowd the field while, near the bottom, a headless human with an erect phallus bleeds, meaning scholars could not agree upon. Some saw funerary rites. Some saw shamanic transformation. Some saw art for its own sake. Everyone ran into the same wall. With no text to translate, no bilingual key to lean on, and 1,000 subtle variations to juggle, human minds defaulted to familiar stories. What if the carvings were not a story in the way we expect at all? What if the language behind them was not about animals, but about positions, cycles, and sky? The hill itself deepened the mystery. At the end of its life, the builders deliberately buried the enclosures, filling them with clean backfill, sealing pillars upright and carvings inward as if turning the circles into a time capsule. People do not throw away monuments so carefully. They archive them. If the stones were meant to speak across ages, then the medium had to be durable, the code had to be repeatable, and the message had to be important enough to protect beneath tons of soil. What kind of message requires a monument this old to be entombed for the future? Teaching a machine to read stone. To escape the cul-de-sac of guesswork, researchers built a complete digital twin of the site. Teams scanned every pillar with structured light, stitched millions of points into sub-millimeter meshes, and draped photogrammetry over the geometry until the carvings were rendered with the fidelity of a fingerprint. LiDAR mapped the broader topography. Ground-penetrating radar traced buried rings and wall lines still sleeping beneath the mound. The archive grew to include sister sites across the region, most prominently Karahan Tepe, which mirrored the T-pillars and circles and added its own surprises, including a chamber lined with human heads carved from bedrock. Every animal, every symbol, every belt, every hand, every notch and cup mark went into a common index. The team did not ask the system for meanings. They trained it to identify relationships. Convolutional neural networks learned the silhouettes and internal features of each animal type, not as labels like fox or serpent, but as clusters of consistent geometry. Graph models recorded where each figure sat on each pillar, which way each figure faced, which figures tended to appear together, and which combinations never coexisted. Sequence models tracked how motifs migrated over time from one enclosure to the next. The result was not a single answer but a statistical map of what the builders did on purpose and what they avoided. Then came the second layer. Astronomers provided parametric models of the night sky at Göbekli Tepe's latitude over a span of 13 millennia. The precession of the equinoxes slowly slides the backdrop of constellations behind the sun and moon. Bright stars rise and set at different azimuths across millennia. Lunar standstills wax and wane. Those motions were converted into features an algorithm could compare with features on stone. Without telling the system that a scorpion might be Scorpio or that a vulture might encode a region of the sky, they let it search for stable correspondences between carved compositions and celestial configurations on specific dates. Patterns surfaced with breathtaking clarity. A fox carved in a certain stance and orientation kept aligning with the position of Sirius when particular enclosures were erected. A snake in a fixed pose matched the ecliptic path in seasons when the moon crossed that sector low to the horizon. A scorpion motif proved to map to the central body of Scorpio with such high confidence that the model treated it as an anchor in many rings, against which other figures snapped into place. The vulture stone stopped looking like a scene and began behaving like a diagram. The vulture's wing traced a swath of sky that matched a band of stars on a date around 12,800 years ago. The scorpion sat where Scorpio would have been. The headless human lined up with a position near the galactic center that, on that date, coincided with a radiant direction for a proposed comet stream. Skeptics pushed back right away, as they should. A powerful classifier can find coincidences in noisy data. The team answered with controls. They randomized pillar layouts and checked whether the sky fit still appeared. It evaporated. They swapped animal labels and watched the alignments collapse. They slid the date forward and back in centuries. The fit sharpened to a narrow window and then softened to nothing. The machine was not hallucinating on random fields. It was detecting a consistent code embedded in real compositions. If that code was real, then the builders were not carving animals for identity alone. They were installing a mnemonic system that fixed positions in the sky to bodies that their community knew by sight. If the hill was a library, then animals were the index tabs that led to celestial entries. If animals were entries, what did the book record the simple positions of stars? Pillar 43 and the night the sky injured the earth. Armed with the correspondence between motifs and constellations, researchers returned to Pillar 43 with a different kind of question. If this is a sky diagram, what sky does it show? The machine tried many skies and found one that fit without strain. Around the onset of the Younger Dryas, a sudden global cooling event roughly 12,800 years ago, the relative positions of the scorpion, the vulture's sweep, and the other figures on the slab lined up with visible constellations at specific azimuths for that latitude. The date range overlapped with geological signals that mark a period of upheaval in ice cores and sediments. The idea that a comet or swarm of fragments struck or airburst over parts of the northern hemisphere has been debated for years and remains controversial in details. The AI was not proving that debate. It was showing that the people at the hill anchored a record to a night sky that belonged to that crisis. The headless human suddenly carried double weight. Human decapitation in ritual contexts can represent transformation or passage, but in a sky code it could also mark mortality at scale. The phallic emphasis could signal generation after destruction. The vulture, a scavenger and a psychopomp in many cultures, lifting an object in its wing could mark the ascent of souls or the path of debris through the sky. The scorpion anchoring the base could point to the constellation that set the coordinate system for the whole panel. Even the handbags that appear at the top of some compositions, long a magnet for speculation, aligned suspiciously with arcs where the sun and moon would track at key times. The machine did not call them bags. It treated them as glyphs marking repeated curves.